We are doing our devotions this week on Psalms that, how did I put it? Psalms that are for when life stinks. That's what I put on it, and we're doing it a little different. I have Nathan Grieve, who's going to be here to be part of a conversation, more of a devotional conversation, is how I'm thinking about looking at Psalm 34 right now. So Psalms for when life stinks. Maybe that's not a technical term, Nathan. When life stinks. In fact, what we think of when life stinks might be completely different than what the psalm writers would consider a stinky life or a moment in life where life stinks. But that's what I put. So that's what we're going with. If you look at the heading, you see it there, Nathan?
Yep, I do.
It says, of David when he pretended to be insane before Abimelech, who drove him away, and he left. Do you remember that
I
account?
Do. And just even, well, looking over the content of the psalm, it actually isn't really immediately obvious to me why this psalm is associated with that event, other than the fact that it was a troubling time for him. But I don't.
Yeah, so he was running from Saul, and then he ends up in this city of the Philistines, Gath. And it's interesting because, of course, he's carrying Goliath's sword, and remember, Goliath is from Gath, and he shows up in Gath, and it's just a strange place for David to show up. You're right, though. When you look at the content of the psalm, it's maybe not as clear that this is the circumstance surrounding it, that he's pretending to be insane. And then even the name is different, actually. If you look at 1 Samuel, it's not Abimelech, it's Achish. That's the name of the king there. So some people think that the title Abimelech is a title given to, it means son of the king, and so it's a title just given to the kings in general. So that's the background, though. And I think, given that, I mean, we could say that David's life was stinking at that moment.
Yeah,
pretty clearly. Saul's trying to kill him. He's finding his refuge in an enemy's city, and he's actually at the place where Goliath was from, and would not have found a welcome mat, I don't think, for him.
Especially if he still has a sword, that might be kind of a giveaway.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. I hadn't thought about that, but David is literally carrying the sword of Goliath into the city of Goliath and hoping to find refuge. So you can see why David is in a tight place when he writes these words. Or maybe he's thinking back of it. It's hard to know exactly when. So I think I'll read through the psalm and then I'll offer a couple comments. And David writes, I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. My soul will boast in the Lord. Let the afflicted hear and rejoice. Glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. This poor man called, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him lack nothing. The lions may grow weak and weary, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, my children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking lies. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. A righteous man may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all. He protects all his bones. Not one of them will be broken. Evil will slay the wicked. The foes of the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems his servants. No one will be condemned who takes refuge in him. So, to be fair, I have to say to everyone that Nathan has not seen this. This is a surprise that I chose Psalm 34, and he is seeing it for the first time just like you are. And so I was going to throw out some things. One thing that you can't tell in English is that this is an acrostic psalm. It's a modified acrostic. So each of the lines begins with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet, but it actually doesn't go quite in order. And the middle of the psalm is verse 12. It's no, verse 11. Sorry, it's the second half of verse 11. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. So that seems to be the focus of the psalm, and it's that fear of the Lord that David is trying to convey to the listeners at this point. And I was just thinking about the fear of the Lord. I think that's a good theme for the psalm. And I suppose when you think about when life stinks, you know, what did David have to fear at this moment? Well, annihilation.
A lot of things. Saul and the dangers of being pursued and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet his concern, at least in the psalm, is about not fearing his enemies, but fearing the Lord. In fact, verse 1, I was going to point out, verse 1, just notice, I will extol the Lord at all times. So you think, okay, David's in this place where this is not a good situation, and yet he still says, at all times I'm going to praise the Lord. At all times I'm going to extol the Lord. And obviously he has to have a reason for that. And I think the key there is this fear of the Lord. And then verse 4, actually, if you start looking at the word fear, you find it all over in the psalm. Verse 4, he delivered me from all my fears, which I think is really interesting too, because he doesn't say he delivered me from my enemies specifically. He said he delivered me from my fears. And it just gets you thinking, as much as we pray for God to deliver us from whatever it is that we're fearing at the moment, do we ever stop and say, deliver me from fear itself, right? As opposed to whatever it is that's the cause of it. And can you say that God has done that? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that's. I guess in some ways our attention is always on the troubles themselves, and are not necessarily as introspective as like the troubles that we're experiencing. They may have some purpose or whatever that we need to go through them. But that our fears are maybe what we need to be addressing.
That we would look at our
introspective look on it rather than like an outside look.
So I guess the question is, if we truly feared the Lord, which is what David's hoping to teach in this psalm, would we have any reason to fear anything else?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, that's why the Bible uses the word so much. I think that we would fear and love God. Even Luther uses in the commandments that if we have a prayer to offer, it's really, Lord, let us fear you and not whatever it is that's making us afraid at the moment. And I suppose, what does it mean to fear the Lord? Hey, I'll ask you, what does it mean to fear the Lord? And I've had a chance to think about this. You haven't.
Well, so I guess I do have to admit that's a weird word because, so I've oftentimes been taught that it's not necessarily like a fear as an afraid sense, but like a reverence. But kind of at some point it kind of blurs together because God is very powerful, and if there's anything in the universe that that you could be afraid of, it would be God. Right, but also it's like that's not really what the we don't need to be afraid of God, because he's a loving, merciful God as well. So it's like a reverence, or sorry, I guess an acknowledgement of his power and his awesomeness.
So will we fear God in heaven?
Okay, that's an interesting thought. I guess I would say yes.
And right? I would agree with you.
Okay.
I suppose I don't know that if there's any passage that would use that word to describe the saints in heaven. But if you understand fear as not tied to the sinful flesh, but rather a fruit of faith, or part of being the new man in Christ, that we would fear God. And that's what you were talking about, I think, when you said reverence for God. Or and you ask, where does fear come from, right? And that's maybe the right question. If your fear is coming from you're I suppose afraid of what God will do to punish you. That's your sinful nature, understanding the reality of sin. But if your fear is coming from love, that you don't want to disappoint God because He is God, then this is fear that is tied as a fruit of faith, right?
Mm.
So obviously, this is not the only place in the Bible that talks about the fear of the Lord, but I think given the circumstance when David is using that as the center of the psalm, he wants to teach us the fear of the Lord. In some ways, it's the secret to not being afraid in life, is to fear the Lord and not everything else that you would tend to be afraid of. Of course, there's some beautiful passages that make that point, right? Verses 7 and 8 are wonderful. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. There it is again, fear, right? Fear him, not fear everything else. He delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Some beautiful words that obviously are pointing us to the comfort that's ours because of God, and that those who fear him are not worse off, but rather we're set free from fear in this world.
Well, so I was just thinking, like when we first read through this, there was some, I guess maybe a little in the later part of the
Want me to
psalm.
go down?
Yeah. Some things that sound very like I guess maybe un-Lutheran, like the idea it sort of comes across or sounds a little bit like God is on this, like we want to do good things so that God will bless us. That kind of it sort of has that sort of feel to it. But I guess if the whole theme of the psalm is the fear of God, then I guess maybe that helps to crystallize kind of the meaning of that. It's not so much that like we do so we so like a righteous man may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from all. So it's not like necessarily like we should be righteous so that God will deliver us from our troubles, but that that a man is righteous because of his, or I guess his righteousness comes out of the fact that he is fearing the Lord.
Yeah, when you understand fear as not an emotion,
Yeah.
A response to a threat, which is, I think, we just can't get away from that idea of fear as a response to a threat, that emotion of, which is one way the Bible uses it, but it's so much more than that. It envelops really faith. I mean, that's why fear and love of God is how Luther puts it, and that's the fruit of faith. So it's not so much a matter of if you're good enough and you're afraid enough of letting God down or something like that, that God will deliver you, but rather it's actually God's promises, I think, that lead us to fear him. When you think about who he is, what his reputation is, and then think of David, how many times David got to see this in action, God protecting him, and that led David to fear God more, not to be less afraid, like, oh, God doesn't care, or he doesn't care if I go away from him, but rather to fear him more in the sense that his faith in God is strengthened. So, yeah, verse 20. I don't know. He protects all his bones; not one of them will be broken. So here's the question: is this a specific prophecy about Jesus? Because of course,
yeah. Because so I mean, obviously, reading through this, I would never see this as talking about a specific person in a specific event happening in the future. So I can't imagine that. Well, I guess some of the prophecies are. I don't know if I understand quite how they all work. But I guess I'm wondering if maybe it wasn't so much it wasn't so much a specific prophecy, but as kind of like when Jesus was crucified, it was kind of like a callback to this, maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so John 19 is where Jesus, it points out Jesus, none of his legs were broken while the other criminals were, because he was already dead. And then John says, as it was written, that one of his bones will be broken. And from what I can tell, it's not a specific reference to Psalm 34, but certainly it's connected here. Another place that would be a prophecy of that, if you would, is really the Exodus account and the account of the Passover, that the lamb, they weren't to break any of the bones, and Jesus is the Passover lamb. But there's no question that here's a place where this is talked about by David, and certainly it's a type of prophecy, maybe not a direct one, but I think I read the word a typical. David is a typical prophecy. He stands as a type of Christ in a sense,
Oh, okay.
or the man he's talking about. But I think there's more than a coincidence that David says this, and Jesus is said the same thing is said about him when John makes that comment in John 19. And I suppose we can make other connections. The angel of the Lord, is that Jesus. I don't know that it particularly matters. We know that it means God's grace and his angels protect us. Although in the Old Testament, the angel of the Lord is thought to be the pre-incarnate Christ often. So I'm not sure we have time to get into that, but just interesting things about the Psalms if you dig a little deeper. So I don't know, anything else about this Psalm that we should point out? We're probably at our time. What did we say, 10 minutes? We're probably at, I don't know.
Well, just the end there, I guess, verse 21, like as so much as talking about, pursuing good and reverence toward the Lord, but then it's kind of the negative example, I guess, at the end there, the evil will slay the wicked. I don't know, just kind of like just kind of little peeks at the inverse, I guess. That
sure, that those who are evil will have it coming, if you will.
It's self-destructive.
Sound out, yeah, outside of God's protective hand. Yeah. Well, I think it's a good psalm for when life is kind of stinks. I just lost it. Yeah. As far as the context of it, certainly fits the bill, and I that idea that, especially verse 4, he delivered me from all my fears. I think that's key. And then you think about right now and all the fear that exists, and that's on both, wherever you fall in the spectrum of afraid of the virus, afraid of what will happen because of it, or wherever it stands. I think as Christians, that's where we have to go. Is we have nothing to fear, no matter what, because we have a God who has delivered us from the fear, even though the threats may still exist. We don't have to be afraid of them. So, all right, well, we'll wrap it up and move on. Entrust this to the listener for further devotional study of Psalm 34.